Good morning and welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the formula. We are setting a standard for accountability, the ownership of your choices, and responsibility, that ability to respond to those choices. Let each care for self and all will be cared for.
So a lot of my peers who are having challenges getting into some of these predominantly white institutions, the affirmative action was great. My father went to Harvard. He was one of very few blacks.
Was he affirmative action person?
I don't know if he was. That was back in the late 60s.
Well, then he wasn't. He earned his way.
So that being said, I still believe that affirmative action helped me get into UCLA, and it gave me access.
You would
and
not
exposure.
have gotten in there on your own because you were not smart enough?
I don't know if I wasn't smart enough, but based on the curve and what I was competing with other individuals who had different educational opportunities and teachers. I'm coming from the LA Unified School District. So at the time, I think LAUSD was still pretty good. But I went to all white schools from high school up through college.
So you got a good education. Why couldn't you get into the school based on your own talent?
I don't know.
And another interesting, observation of this particular interaction with Pastor Jesse, as I like to call him. So interesting that a couple of things occur to me. One is that her father is coming up during a time when affirmative action did not exist. So he had to earn his way through whatever schooling he went through. And her going through the process and saying, all of the... And did you notice that she almost said economic, but instead she used a different word during that one exchange? What she reveals, though, is that she didn't know why she wasn't able to get in. She wanted to basically assign to it that there was some sort of systemic racism going on. But, and the other thing that I thought was interesting was that she mentions that they were all white schools. Really? In LA? Okay, so something seems off about that, right? That, and I'm sorry, she doesn't seem old enough that where she went was an all-white school. And if it was an all-white school, do we not have some history of understanding that in such circumstances, those were probably very good schools? Because, if the systemic racism was going on, then all the white people would go there because that's where they wanted all the good schools. They wanted all the kids to go and get a good education. So was she infiltrating the school? Did her father have such a position and station in life that he was able to afford to move to a district where she could go to better schooling and get a better education? I don't know, but these are the thoughts that come to me when I start listening to someone that wants to disparage whatever the school was and the attempt to say that they were all white schools. If this were back in the 20s, maybe the 30s, I might take that into consideration. But the fact that it's not doesn't quite add up in this particular instance. And the fact that she didn't know, that she wanted to say that she didn't know if she was talented enough. Well, apparently she wasn't. Because if she had, again, I mentioned it last week, if she was accomplished, if she had applied herself and she was able to get in through her own merit, then she wouldn't have needed affirmative action. And yet she boasted the use of affirmative action in order to get her into wherever she went into college or whatever that particular school was. I think she said UCLA. So it's just an interesting observation that a person has a distortion of a reality that they're not willing to own because it doesn't fit the self-inflicted victimization that they want to use as their autobiography.
Maybe because I didn't have some of the opportunity.
But you had the opportunity.
No, first of all,
you had the same opportunity those white kids were having.
Not necessarily. I had different teachers. I had different
resources. So you
resources.
went to a white integrated school.
I'm talking about
mostly
going
white.
into these other into UCLA, I still had to be able to deal with some of the issues in going to predominantly white schools.
Like
but
what?
I still had to be able to compete.
Like what?
What do you mean, like what?
Some of the issues going to a predominantly
I would graduate from University High School, and at the time they didn't have an African American student union.
An African American student union?
At the school.
Well, that's a good thing.
They didn't have one.
That's a good thing.
Why?
Why do you need something like that?
They have Asian student unions. They have Jewish student unions. They have all kind of different.
Did they have
student
white
unions.
student union?
They need student union. They own the whole school. So
but the kids didn't own the school. The kids didn't.
But I'm saying there's nothing. I don't think there's nothing wrong
It's
with having
amazing that
a
you think this
segregated,
way.
population of students who just want to study together, or work together, or to be able to.
Would you
deal
be
with
in support of a white student union?
Yeah, of course.
It would be okay with you?
Yeah, why not?
But most blacks don't feel that way.
I think all cultures should be able to segregate and to be able to work within their cultures and network within their own cultures. Absolutely.
What an interesting statement that she makes about the idea of people being able to segregate. So which horse are you going after? Are you wanting to be a victim to the fact that people used to segregate you and you didn't want the segregation, or the fact that you now want the segregation because you find value in it? And I just think it's an interesting thing. Of course, to me personally, it's just like, I don't see the value in forced segregation. I think if people want to figure it out and they want to be a part of their own circle, their own tribe, whatever it is, then that's up to them. But what does it say about you as an individual that you want no other types of races or ethnicities or genders or sexualities, or that you don't want them a part of whatever circle you're within? You limit the scope, again, of your experience in life, but what message are you also sending to yourself on a regular basis, a repeated basis of, I don't want to hear or see anything that is not what I have already decided in this life as far as my view and my filter of the world, which is what she's talking about.
Does racism exist?
I believe racism does exist.
And where's the
absolutely.
proof of that?
You just see it all over in the country. With proof of it. In terms of just
what do I see?
Disproportionate in the economics with black people.
But that has nothing to do with racism.
It does. Racism is about power. It's about who's in control. And black people can't be racist because we're not in control. We're not in control of the educational system, some of the social organizations and things that run this country. We're not in control. Racism is about power.
But you would be in control of your own life if you had good parents, if they taught you how to be independent, if they taught you how to build, how to take care of. I've noticed that the reason I left where I lived over there in the Crenshaw district is that once the white people left, because once I moved there, when I first moved there, it was mostly whites. But once they left, as they did in Gary, Indiana, and other places, the blacks turned it into a ghetto. A beautiful area went to hell in a handbasket, so I got out. But if blacks had more character and they were taking care of themselves and being responsible and buying land and teaching their children,
that has to be taught.
Then right, so that has nothing to do with racism.
But of course, that has to be taught.
So it's not racist. It's not white people's fault that you're not teaching your children to do that.
No, but it's not. If the parents don't know,
they don't know. But that's not white people's fault, though.
So the couple of things that came up in my mind when I was listening to that was one, that she was saying that racism is about power. And I thought, well, actually, that's a very interesting statement because it is about power, but isn't the racism then about you're trying to be in power, trying to empower yourself by calling other people racist, by putting them in a position where then they have to defend something that's indefensible? How do you prove a negative? Right? There's no way. It's like saying, to prove that, there is no God. Okay, well, how do I prove that? Because I wouldn't know where to look to say that there's no God. So how do I prove that a negative, that I'm not racist or that someone is not racist? There's no way to say that. You can keep coming up with things and saying, I've never said these things, whatever, but that doesn't mean that the person making the accusation isn't going to keep pounding the table, right? I heard that statement before, is like, when a person's in a debate, they pound the facts. And when you don't have any facts, then in just emotion, you pound the table. Well, so she's talking about the fact, first of all, that she says that she thinks racism is about power. But I think the power that she's talking about is the power that she wants to have in order to force people into doing something or to bringing her entitlement that she's not entitled to, right? If you really want an equal opportunity, then you level a playing field and you let everybody play on the field. And if you're a good player, well, then you get to do certain things on the field. And if you're not, well, then unfortunately the coach is going to put you on the bench. That's just the way it works. Now, the other thing that I really liked that Jesse mentioned was that he, found it interesting that there was in Crenshaw district, there was an area there that was really very affluent, it sounds like, or was very nice. And, all of these people started leaving, all these white people started leaving. And he said that black people started going in there, and at some point they turned it into a ghetto. So, okay, so she then says, well, part of, all of that responsibility, accountability, all that kind of stuff, they just didn't know. And it's like, okay, they didn't know. So they didn't know what? They didn't know how to own their choices, how to be accountable, take ownership of their life. And he even points that out. But she doesn't want to look into that aspect, right? She doesn't want to see the reality is that, listen, you're where you are because of the choices that you made. You have to be able to make that connection of every choice I made, it's like walking up the stairs or you walk up the stairs, down the stairs, going up a staircase, right? Every step you take ownership of. And what if each one of those particular steps is towards your own success? Because then when you reach the top and you get to the end of your journey where you wanted to be, it all belongs to you. It doesn't belong to anybody else. You didn't need somebody to come along and all of a sudden pick you up and carry you, one flight of stairs up, which is basically what affirmative action is. You don't need that. You need to just make your own choices and keep allowing yourself the opportunity to see what is presented in front of you so that you can develop your own self, your own personal development, and create your own life out of the choices that you've made. So I thought that piece was very interesting that Jesse points that out to her, but she still doesn't want to see that reality.
If they go into some of these institutions, these predominantly white institutions, they are targeted. They don't have the same opportunities because of their color. It's true. I mean,
then why go in there then? Why not go to an all-black school if you feel that?
Some people do choose to do that.
I'm sorry?
Some people do choose.
That's you see a lot of these black kids going to these white universities, and then they force their way in by saying, I need affirmative action. Once they get in, now they crying racism. Why do you want to force your way in with the people you think are your enemies, and you're still complaining once you get there?
I don't think people are forcing their way. Does
affirmative
action even
is
exist?
forced based on color.
Does affirmative action even exist? Are people getting in based on affirmative action?
Yes.
Today,
otherwise they wouldn't be there.
The way Trump has it down, he's just leveled the playing field. So it is going to have to be more about being able to be competitive.
Hallelujah.
And again, in this clip, it's interesting that she starts stumbling into the reality without realizing it, because she's talking about how, these schools, they set it up in such a way that it makes it difficult. That's why they need affirmative action. But then he makes the relative point of, well, in essence, why do you want to be where then people don't want you to be? Why would you do that? So, and then she doesn't take ownership of it by saying, well, they have a great education there, or, it's where I wanted to be, or my friends. She doesn't take any ownership of that. All she wants to say is that you're making it difficult for me to be a part of this education system at this particular school. But he rightly points out, well, why do you want to be where people don't want you? And I'm going to say cross-apply this to other areas of your life. Why do you want to be at a job where somebody doesn't want you? Why do you want to be in a relationship where somebody doesn't want you? Why not just walk away? Why is it that you develop in yourself a sense of entitlement, that you're entitled to the job, you're entitled to the relationship, you're entitled to the education, you're entitled to the experience when there is no entitlement, right? Entitlement is a fantasy. It's a way to inflict victimization on yourself and not necessary. And then the stumbling into, well, now people are going to have to be competitive because, Trump, apparently, and I'd have to go back and look at and didn't see when this happened about affirmative action and all of that going away. And maybe that has to do with the Supreme Court and that whole ruling and everything. But then I love Jesse says, hallelujah, because he's right. And then she doesn't even understand that she once again has stumbled into the reality. Reality will always find its way. The reality is that Trump went in, leveled the playing field. Now you have to be competitive. He understands that probably more than any other president that I've ever known, that in order to be competitive, you level the playing field and people go in and then they let their talent rise to the top. That's how you make a life, is by going in and making choice, being accountable and responsible for your choice, not going in and thinking that you're entitled to something and that somebody's supposed to just give it to you for the mere fact that you're a woman or that you are black or you're Asian or whatever you are. Not necessary.
She didn't grow up in a political house. I didn't either. Most of my life I thought I was a Democrat because I was poor and I had food stamps. And I thought this was the way it was supposed to be. It wasn't until I became a man, a father, a business owner, a tax-paying American that I was like, oh no, what the like, absolutely not.
That's interesting. Is that a commonality?
Super.
Growing up like that, you just automatically assume, we're Democrats.
100%. No. The Democrats have been so good at masking themselves as for the people.
And of course, finally, that one last clip there. The thing that I really liked about it, they do reference a political party, which is not untrue. There is a reality to that. But the piece that I really liked about it is that it's a reminder, like all of the clips that I did last weekend and this weekend with Pastor Jesse, that you can be living in a false reality. You can, like he was saying, that, people mask themselves. And sometimes they're not understanding the reality. And I think what's fascinating is if you are open to the reality, then it will show itself to you. And life changes on a dime. And we are at the end of another podcast. Thank you so much for joining me this weekend. Hit that like button if you would. Share this with your family and friends. You never know how it might help them. If you're interested, the link down to my book at lulu.com is down below. And we will see each other next weekend for another podcast. The formula is setting the standard. Let each care for self and all will be cared for.